trying to help my friend get an apartment and shit. And I'm like, yo, why don't you just get an apartment in the Bronx? And they was telling me how, like, it's like, yo, it's expensive to look at apartments in the Bronx. I'm like, oh, here you go. Here you go with your excuses now. Why rent is so expensive? How the fuck is rent so expensive in the most cheapest borough?
There's a woman on TikTok who is going viral right now because her rent went from $1,300 to $1,800 a month with no warning. That is a significant amount of money for your rent to increase to the point where that would make or break somebody's ability to pay rent. I would recommend that this girl see if she can find a cheaper place, but with the increase of rent, is that possible? I have no idea.
But I'm just not understanding like how people are graduating college and like moving out on their own, trying to be independent. You're gonna tell me that it costs $1,000 to live with 3 other people.
We've been told all our lives that you're not truly an adult until you move out on your own. But more and more people of all ages are foregoing independence for financial necessity and moving back home. In fact, 1.5 million more adults under the age of 35 live with their parents today than they did a decade ago. The issue? Affordability. Today we're talking about rent specifically, but even if you own, housing will probably be your biggest expense until you die. In 2023, 21 million renter households spent more than 30% of their income on housing, and the average cost of rent in the US has increased almost $900 a month from 20 years ago. No one can afford to buy, no one can afford to rent. What the fuck are we doing here? But here's the thing, every time rent goes up, people tell you to just move, as if there's some magical city where housing is still affordable. But rent isn't expensive by accident. It is expensive by design. Since living in California, my portion of rent, whether living on my own or with a roommate or partner, has increased from $800 when I first moved here in 2010 to today at $2,500. Now, don't get me wrong, I love living here, and part of that cost increase is due to change of location, improved financial ability, and personal aesthetic, but that still does not change the fact that I am paying more than my parents ever did for less space and less stability. And I don't say that to complain, it's just like simple math. What used to be middle-class life now costs 6 figures, and even then, you may barely be scraping by. So what gives? Why, in a time where billionaires continue to hit record profits year after year, is affordability for the masses such an issue? If you feel like rent keeps on going up no matter what city you live in, you are not imagining it. It is not inflation, it is not avocado toast, it is decades of policy designed to make housing a wealth-building tool instead of a human right. Affordable housing is a broad and complex subject intertwined with many disciplines: finance, economics, politics, and social services. The definition of affordable housing also changes depending on the context to which you're talking about. Are we talking about affordable housing compared to your personal income, or government-funded affordable housing that includes Section 8 and public housing? Shane Phillips, Housing Initiative Manager at the UCLA Lewis Center for Regional Policy Studies, calls this capital A affordable housing. This video by PBS does a great overview on the history of capital A affordable housing, housing reform, and how public perception is being manipulated as justification to tear down public housing. It is absolutely worth a watch. Plus, now more than ever, we need to support public broadcasting. But for this video, I want to focus on little a affordable housing. The history of little a affordable housing is vast and deep, but I want to start with my personal villain, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan ushered in a new era of believing that poor people were evil and wealthy people were more important than anyone else. In the 1980s, Reagan pushed for sweeping financial deregulation, gutting restrictions on banks, savings and loans, and investment firms, so money could move faster and riskier, allowing real estate developers and financial institutions to treat housing as a speculative asset, not shelter. Before 1980, the federal government actually used to build housing. But during Reagan's 8 years as president, he essentially disposed of the idea that building housing is an obligation of the government. Like I said, evil. The Tax Reform Act of 1986 reduced federal subsidies and tax incentives, in which Reagan was basically able to halt multi-family construction in its tracks. And this all happened after Reagan built a housing task force dominated by developers, landlords, and bankers, which took away billions with a B, billions of dollars of welfare and housing from the poorest Americans. The lack of homes being built and housing being taken away from those in need caused mass homelessness on a scale the US has ever seen. Reagan told us the market would lift everyone up. But what it really did was lift landlords, developers, and banks, and then quietly started pricing the rest of us out. Then comes Clinton, who doubled down on the home ownership society by expanding access to mortgages, but without fixing income inequality. The Community Reinvestment Act, passed in the 70s, then fortified in the Clinton years, required banks to make loans to people with poor or non-existent credit histories. And yes, that sounds great in theory, right? Giving everyone the opportunity to own homes. But with loosening lending standards, subprime loans exploded and home values inflated faster than wages. Plus, Wall Street began packaging mortgages into securities, literally turning your home loan into a financial product to be traded and peddled to investors worldwide. Then, surprise, surprise, comes the crash, and 10 million Americans lost their homes. And instead of rebuilding a fair housing system, the US handed it to their best friend, Wall Street. Hedge funds and private equity firms like BlackRock bought foreclosed properties in bulk, converting them into rentals. Regular families couldn't compete against the unlimited funds of private equity firms, forcing people who might have normally been able to afford to buy a house to continue to rent, therefore increasing the need for rentals. And when a few firms own the majority of properties, they can price it at whatever the fuck they want because they have no competition. And here we are today, competing with corporate landlords who brought in $4.3 billion, again with a B, billion dollars in net income in 2023, and investors who own nearly 1 in 5 single-family homes in major cities. We have hedge funds competing with first-time buyers, then renters competing with algorithms and hedge funds. Cities can't build enough affordable housing because zoning laws written decades ago and wages still haven't kept up with inflation.
Somebody wake up, the world is gonna roll me. Somebody wake up.
Every part of this system was designed to protect existing wealth. Homeownership becomes generationally exclusive, and millennials and Gen Z enter adulthood at the peak of this imbalance. Millennials have been through a lot. Renting not by choice, but by necessity. And yet somehow the conversation always comes back to us.
We're seeing data right now that 25% of millennials, their parents are paying for their housing in one way or another. Let me just tell you, moms and dads, not good. Not good for your little millennial. They are much better off to face some calluses, some stress, some hard times, make some hard choices, stand up and square their shoulders and be a man, be a woman, instead of a child.
If you can't afford to rent, move somewhere cheaper. If you can't buy a house, stop buying iced coffee. But that's the genius of American economics. It makes systematic failure feel like personal shame. But what the government doesn't get about housing is it's not just about money. It is about safety, it is about identity, and it is about belonging. When people can't afford to live near their jobs or families, communities disappear. Cities hollow out, creatives leave, and we all end up a little bit more isolated. So, if you're feeling like you're doing everything right and still can't keep up, you are not crazy. You are living in a system that is rigged. The Los Angeles rental market in 2025 remains one of the most competitive in the country. Limited rental inventory, high tenant demand, and affordability challenges continue to define the market across all neighborhoods. It took my friend, I would say maybe like 6 months of searching every single weekend, visiting hundreds of units before she found a place. And frankly, it's why we will probably stay maybe another year in this place, even though we intended to move out in 2026, just because it's just not something we have the emotional and financial capability to deal with. So what is the solution? I mean, zoning and land use reforms to build more housing and to make housing more affordable absolutely needs to happen. But how do you kick out hedge funds and private equity firms out of the real estate game? How do you do that? Because even though senators have introduced legislation to tackle the housing affordability crisis by going after hedge funds and institutional investors, the reality is lobbying groups control our government. So until we can get special interests out of policy by voting for people who don't take corporate money, we will probably not see real change. So if you are renting right now, it is not because you failed. It is because the system was designed to make renting your only option. Renting used to be a temporary phase on the path to ownership, but now it's a permanent condition for millions, and you know what? I think that's okay. Yes, there is still that major issue of housing affordability, but at least with renting, you can upgrade after a year. You can move. You don't have to save hundreds of thousands of dollars for a down payment. You don't have to do any maintenance. You have this flexibility that homeownership does not offer you. Lots of popular financial educators are foregoing home ownership for renting, which frees up money that can be invested elsewhere in the long term.
We have to understand that buying a house can be a good financial decision. It can be. But renting and investing the difference can also be a good decision. And right now in the US, in the top 50 US metro cities, it is cheaper to rent than to buy.
And as a homeowner and a renter, I actually wish that I did not buy my house at all. If you followed my journey for the past few years, you know that it was a mess and it was a disaster. And I feel like I could be doing so much more with my life if I didn't have money tied up in a home I could use to invest in a business or invest in myself somehow. You know, we'll talk about all of that in a different video, but the regret is real. And honestly, if you're able to live back home to save up for a home, whether it is rented or owned, I definitely don't think that's a failure. I think that is a smart money decision. When you are told that your rent check is throwing away money, it plants this quiet shame, like you are behind in a race that you did not sign up for. But that's not financial advice, that is propaganda. So if you're renting, live your life. Build wealth in other ways if you are able to. Do not apologize or feel frustrated for a game that you were never meant to win. And if anything, the one thing that we can do again is to vote in politicians who are not in the pockets of big firms. So if you are a renter, tell me how you're feeling. Let me know in the comments, are you feeling frustrated by the idea of never owning a home? Or are you feeling maybe free with the idea that yes, I may not own a home, but I'm also able to move around, travel the world, do what I want with that extra money. I am Aisha Dang. Thank you so much for watching my very first analysis video, and I will see you all next time. Bye.